What if I told you that Carl Jung, the legendary psychologist, identified the exact moment when love turns toxic? And what if this moment is happening in your relationship right now without you even realizing it? In his groundbreaking work on human psychology, Jung discovered a psychological pattern that predicts relationship failure with terrifying accuracy. He called it the shadow projection, and it's the invisible killer of authentic love. Picture this: you meet someone who seems perfect. They have everything you've been looking for. The chemistry is electric. The connection feels destined. But then, slowly, something shifts. What once felt like paradise begins to feel like a prison. Jung warned us about this over a century ago, yet millions of people fall into this trap every single day. They mistake intensity for love, obsession for passion, and control for care. Here's the shocking truth. Toxic relationships don't start with obvious red flags. They don't begin with screaming matches or obvious manipulation. They start with something much more subtle, much more seductive, and infinitely more dangerous. They start with what Jung called the perfect mirror, when someone appears to be everything you've ever wanted, reflecting back your deepest desires and hidden needs. But this mirror is an illusion, and when it shatters, it takes your sense of self with it. Jung studied thousands of patients and discovered that people who fall into toxic relationships share one common psychological blind spot. They project their unconscious desires onto their partner, creating a fantasy that has nothing to do with reality. The most dangerous part? This process feels like falling in love. Your brain releases the same chemicals, your heart races the same way, your body responds with the same intensity. But underneath this intoxicating experience, something sinister is brewing. Jung identified specific psychological markers that appear in the first few weeks of these doomed relationships. He documented patterns of behavior that seem romantic on the surface, but are actually warning signs of psychological entanglement. What makes this even more tragic is that the people who fall hardest for these toxic patterns are often the most loving, the most generous, the most emotionally available individuals. They're not weak or naive. They're simply unaware of how their unconscious mind works. If you've ever wondered why you keep attracting the wrong people or why your relationships start amazing but end in disaster, you need to watch this entire video. What Jung discovered will change how you see love forever. Before we dive deeper into Jung's revolutionary insights, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what I'm about to share could save you years of heartbreak and help you find the authentic love you deserve. This isn't just theory. This is practical psychology that you can apply to your life immediately. Jung's work on relationships has been validated by decades of research, and understanding these patterns could be the difference between finding your soulmate and falling into another toxic cycle. Now, let me introduce you to Carl Gustav Jung, one of the most influential psychologists in history. While Freud focused on sexual drives, Jung discovered something far more profound: the hidden forces that drive human relationships. Jung wasn't just a theorist sitting in an ivory tower. He worked directly with patients, many of whom came to him with relationship problems. He noticed patterns that other psychologists missed, connections that seemed impossible but proved to be devastatingly accurate. Through his work, Jung identified what he called the psychological types, different personality patterns that determine how we love, how we attach, and most importantly, how we project our unconscious needs onto others. But here's where it gets fascinating. Jung discovered that toxic relationships follow a predictable psychological script. There are specific stages, specific patterns, and specific warning signs that appear every single time. The first stage is what Jung called unconscious projection. This is when you meet someone and immediately feel like you've known them forever. You feel completed by them, understood by them, seen by them in a way that no one else has ever seen you. This feeling is so powerful, so intoxicating, that it overrides your logical mind. You ignore red flags, you excuse concerning behavior, you rationalize away your intuition. Why? Because your unconscious mind is convinced that this person holds the key to your happiness. Jung warned that this initial stage is actually the most dangerous phase of any relationship. It's when you're most vulnerable to manipulation, most likely to lose yourself, and most prone to creating a fantasy that has nothing to do with reality. The person you think you're falling in love with isn't real. They're a projection of your unconscious desires, your unmet needs, your hidden wounds. And when this projection inevitably collapses, the pain is devastating. But Jung didn't just identify the problem. He provided the solution. He developed techniques to recognize these patterns before they destroy you, methods to distinguish between authentic love and unconscious projection. Stay with me, because in the next section, I'm going to reveal the exact signs Jung identified that indicate you're dealing with projection rather than genuine connection. Jung's concept of the shadow is one of his most profound discoveries, and it holds the key to understanding why smart, successful people keep falling into toxic relationships. The shadow represents everything about yourself that you've rejected, denied, or refused to acknowledge. It contains your repressed emotions, your unacceptable desires, your hidden fears, and your secret shames. Here's where it gets dangerous. When you meet someone new, your unconscious mind immediately begins scanning them for familiar patterns. But it's not looking for healthy patterns. It's looking for ways to play out your unresolved psychological dramas. Jung observed that people unconsciously seek partners who will trigger their deepest wounds, not to heal them, but to repeat familiar patterns of pain. This happens because your unconscious mind confuses familiarity with love. Think about it. If you grew up with unpredictable love, you might find yourself attracted to people who are emotionally unavailable. If you experienced abandonment, you might be drawn to people who seem likely to leave. If you felt controlled, you might seek out controlling partners. Your conscious mind tells you that you want healthy love, but your unconscious mind is programmed to recreate the emotional environment of your childhood. This is what Jung called the compulsion to repeat. The most insidious part is that these toxic attractions feel like destiny. The person who triggers your deepest wounds will feel like your soulmate. The chemistry will be electric because your unconscious recognizes the familiar pattern. Jung documented case after case of intelligent, accomplished individuals who repeatedly chose partners who mirrored their psychological wounds. They would describe feeling addicted to these relationships, unable to leave even when they knew the relationship was destroying them. This is because toxic relationships activate the same neural pathways as addiction. Your brain becomes dependent on the cycle of intensity, drama, and emotional chaos. What feels like passion is actually psychological dependence. Jung identified several key signs that you're dealing with shadow projection rather than authentic love. First, the relationship feels too intense too quickly. Second, you find yourself changing your behavior, values, or identity to please this person. Third, you make excuses for their concerning behavior. Fourth, you feel like you need them to feel complete. Fifth, the relationship consumes most of your mental and emotional energy. And sixth, your friends and family express concern about the changes they see in you. But here's what most people don't realize. Recognizing these patterns is only half the battle. Jung discovered that breaking free from toxic relationships requires a specific psychological process. Keep watching to learn exactly how to do it. Jung made another groundbreaking discovery that explains why certain people become irresistibly attractive to us, even when they're clearly wrong for us. He called these unconscious forces the Anima and Animus. The Anima represents the feminine, aspect within the male psyche, while the animus represents the masculine aspect within the female psyche. These aren't gender stereotypes. They're archetypal energies that exist in everyone, regardless of gender or sexual orientation. Here's the crucial insight. When you meet someone who embodies your anima or animus projection, you experience what Jung called falling in love at first sight. But you're not falling in love with a real person. You're falling in love with your own unconscious projection. Jung observed that these projections are often based on idealized images from childhood. The perfect parent you never had, the fairy tale romance you dreamed of, the missing piece that would make you whole. The problem is that no real human being can live up to these unconscious projections. They're based on fantasy, not reality. When the inevitable disappointment occurs, the relationship becomes a battlefield of unmet expectations and projected blame. Jung documented a specific pattern in these relationships: the initial idealization phase, where your partner can do no wrong, followed by the devaluation phase, where everything they do irritates you, and finally the discard phase, where the relationship ends in bitterness and confusion. What makes this pattern so destructive is that it prevents you from ever seeing your partner as they really are. You're too busy projecting your unconscious material onto them to have a genuine relationship with them. Jung worked with countless patients who described feeling possessed by these attractions. They would say things like, "I know this person is wrong for me, but I can't stop thinking about them," or "I feel like I'm losing myself in this relationship, but I can't leave." This is because Anima and Animus projections bypass your rational mind and speak directly to your unconscious. They trigger primal needs for completion, validation, and psychological wholeness that feel like life or death necessities. The most dangerous part is that people who carry strong anima or animus projections often have narcissistic or manipulative tendencies. They've learned to reflect back what others want to see, making them irresistibly attractive to people with unresolved psychological wounds. Jung warned that these relationships are ultimately empty because they're based on projection rather than genuine intimacy. You fall in love with a mirror of your own psyche, not with another human being. The question is, how do you distinguish between authentic attraction and unconscious projection? Jung developed specific techniques to make this distinction, and I'm about to share them with you. Don't click away. This could change your entire approach to relationships. One of Jung's most important contributions to understanding relationships is his concept of the persona, the mask we wear to present ourselves to the world. In toxic relationships, people fall in love with personas, not authentic selves. The persona is your social identity, your public face, your carefully crafted image. It includes your professional achievements, your social status, your physical appearance, and the personality traits you want others to see. Jung discovered that many people become so identified with their persona that they lose touch with their authentic self. They become what he called persona identified, meaning they mistake their mask for their true identity. This creates a fundamental problem in relationships. If you don't know who you really are beneath your persona, how can you expect someone else to love the real you? And if you're attracted to someone's persona rather than their authentic self, what happens when the mask inevitably slips? Jung observed that toxic relationships often begin with mutual persona attraction. Two people present their best possible selves, creating an illusion of compatibility that has nothing to do with their deeper psychological reality. The initial stages of these relationships feel magical because both people are performing idealized versions of themselves. They're not dealing with real human complexity, emotional messiness, or psychological depth. But Jung warned that the persona is exhausting to maintain. Eventually, everyone's mask begins to slip. revealing the shadow material underneath. This is when the honeymoon phase ends and the real relationship begins. The problem is that people who fell in love with personas are usually unprepared for authentic human reality. They become disappointed, angry, or even disgusted when their partner reveals normal human flaws, needs, and limitations. Jung documented how this dynamic creates a cycle of mutual deception. Both partners become increasingly invested in maintaining their personas, leading to relationships that are performances rather than authentic connections. He observed that people in these relationships often describe feeling lonely even when they're together, disconnected despite physical proximity, and misunderstood despite constant communication. This is because true intimacy requires what Jung called psychological nakedness, the willingness to be seen and accepted in your full human complexity, including your shadows, your wounds, and your imperfections. Toxic relationships avoid this kind of vulnerability at all costs. Instead, they operate on the level of mutual manipulation, where each person tries to get their needs met without revealing their true self. But Jung discovered something remarkable. When people learn to distinguish between persona and authentic self, their entire relationship dynamic changes. They become capable of genuine intimacy for the first time. Want to know how to make this distinction? Keep watching. Jung's theory of psychological types reveals why certain personality combinations create explosive chemistry that feels like love, but actually leads to psychological destruction. Jung identified 4 primary psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Each person has a dominant function that shapes how they perceive reality and make decisions. Here's where it gets fascinating. Jung discovered that people are often most attracted to their psychological opposite. Thinkers are drawn to feelers, sensors to intuitives, introverts to extroverts. This attraction happens because your opposite type carries psychological qualities that you lack or have underdeveloped. Your unconscious mind is drawn to these missing pieces, hoping to achieve psychological wholeness through relationship. But Jung warned that this opposites attract dynamic is actually the foundation of most toxic relationships. Instead of complementing each other, opposite types often end up in constant conflict, each trying to force the other to see reality their way. Think about it. A thinking type makes decisions based on logic and analysis, while a feeling type makes decisions based on values and emotions. Initially, this difference might seem romantic. The logical person appreciates their partner's emotional depth, while the feeling person values their partner's rationality. But over time, these differences become sources of fundamental incompatibility. The thinking type becomes frustrated with what they see as their partner's irrational emotional decisions. The feeling type becomes hurt by what they perceive as their partner's cold, unfeeling approach to life. Jung observed that these conflicts are rarely about the surface issues couples argue about. They're about fundamental differences in how each type processes reality. These differences can't be resolved through compromise because they're rooted in basic psychological structure. The most toxic combinations occur when both people are unconscious of their psychological type and try to force their partner to function according to their own psychological preferences. Jung documented specific patterns for each type combination. Intuitive types often attract sensing types, but then become frustrated with their partner's focus on practical details. Sensing types appreciate their intuitive partner's vision, but become exhausted by their impracticality. Extroverted types are drawn to introverted types, but then try to drag them into social situations that drain their energy. Introverted types value their extroverted partner's social skills, but eventually feel overwhelmed by their need for external stimulation. The tragedy is that these relationships could work if both people understood and accepted their psychological differences. But toxic relationships are characterized by the attempt to change or fix your partner rather than accept them as they are. Jung developed specific strategies for different type combinations to create harmony instead of conflict. But first, you need to understand the most dangerous relationship pattern he discovered. This next insight could save you from years of heartbreak. One of Jung's most disturbing discoveries was how parental complexes unconsciously drive people into toxic relationships that recreate their childhood dynamics with devastating accuracy. Jung observed that everyone carries unconscious images of the ideal mother and father formed during early childhood. These images become psychological templates that influence every significant relationship for the rest of your life. If you had a loving, supportive mother, you carry a positive mother complex that helps you form healthy relationships. But if your mother was critical, absent, or emotionally unstable, you carry a negative mother complex that attracts similar patterns in romantic relationships. The same applies to father complexes. Your relationship with your father creates an unconscious template for authority, protection, and masculine energy that plays out in your adult relationships, often in ways you don't consciously recognize. Here's the shocking part. Jung discovered that people don't seek partners who will heal their childhood wounds. They seek partners who will recreate them. Your unconscious mind is more interested in familiar patterns than in healthy ones. This is why women with absent fathers often find themselves attracted to emotionally unavailable men. It's why men with controlling mothers often choose controlling partners. The unconscious mind confuses familiar with safe, even when familiar is actually dangerous. Jung documented case after case of intelligent, successful individuals who repeatedly chose partners who mirrored their most problematic parent. They would describe feeling chemistry and connection with people who treated them in ways that were eerily similar to their childhood experiences. The most tragic part is that these relationships feel like destiny. The person who carries your parental complex will feel like the one. Your nervous system will recognize the familiar patterns and interpret them as love. Jung observed that these relationships often involve what he called psychological incest, an unconscious attempt to resolve childhood issues through romantic relationships. This creates relationships that are psychologically unhealthy and emotionally suffocating. People in these relationships often describe feeling like children around their partner or feeling responsible for their partner's emotional well-being in ways that mirror parent-child dynamics. The mother complex shows up as either seeking a partner who will take care of you like a mother or seeking a partner you can mother. The father complex appears as either seeking a partner who will provide authority and protection like a father, or seeking a partner you can rescue and guide. Jung warned that these patterns are incredibly difficult to break because they operate below the level of conscious awareness. People often don't realize they're recreating their childhood dynamics until they've already invested years in a toxic relationship. But Jung discovered something hopeful. Once you become conscious of your parental complexes, you can begin to choose relationships based on compatibility rather than unconscious compulsion. The technique he developed is surprisingly simple, and I'm about to share it with you. Jung's solution to toxic relationship patterns involves a process he called integration, becoming conscious of your unconscious projections so you can choose relationships based on reality rather than fantasy. The first step in Jung's integration process is what he called withdrawing projections. This means recognizing when you're seeing your partner through the lens of your unconscious material rather than seeing them as they actually are. Jung developed a simple but powerful technique. Whenever you have an intense emotional reaction to your partner, whether positive or negative, ask yourself, what part of myself am I seeing in them? If you're idealizing your partner, you're likely projecting positive shadow material. qualities you possess but don't acknowledge in yourself. If you're demonizing your partner, you're likely projecting negative shadow material, qualities you can't accept in yourself. The key insight is that your strongest attractions and repulsions usually have more to do with your internal psychological landscape than with your partner's actual behavior. Jung taught his patients to keep what he called a projection journal. Every time they felt intense emotion toward their partner, they would write down the specific trigger and then explore what personal wound or unmet need might be driving their reaction. Over time, this practice reveals patterns. You begin to see how your past experiences, childhood wounds, and unconscious complexes influence your perception of your partner. The second step is developing what Jung called psychological differentiation, the ability to distinguish between your internal experience and external reality. This means learning to sit with your emotional reactions without immediately acting on them or assuming they accurately reflect your partner's intentions or character. Jung observed that most relationship conflicts are actually internal conflicts being projected outward. When you learn to recognize and work with your internal conflicts directly, your external relationships become much more peaceful. The third step is what Jung called active imagination. Consciously engaging with your unconscious material through dreams, fantasies, and creative expression. This process allows you to meet your psychological needs internally rather than demanding that your partner fulfill roles they were never meant to play. Jung found that when people complete this integration process, their entire approach to relationships changes. They become attracted to partners based on genuine compatibility rather than unconscious compulsion. They stop trying to change or fix their partners and instead focus on accepting them as they are. They take responsibility for their own emotional needs rather than making their partner responsible for their happiness. Most importantly, they become capable of authentic intimacy, the ability to be fully known and accepted in their complete humanity. Jung's integration process isn't easy, but it's the only path to genuine love. In this final section, I'll give you practical steps you can take right now to begin this transformation in your own relationships. Now that you understand Jung's insights into toxic relationship patterns, let me give you practical tools you can use immediately to transform your love life. First, Jung's shadow work exercise. Make a list of everything you find most attractive in potential partners. Then ask yourself honestly, do you possess these qualities yourself? Often we're attracted to people who display qualities we've disowned in ourselves. Next, make a list of qualities that instantly repel you in others. These represent your shadow projections, aspects of yourself you refuse to acknowledge. Jung discovered that integrating these rejected parts of yourself eliminates their unconscious power over your relationships. Jung's parent inventory technique. Write detailed descriptions of your mother and father, including both positive and negative traits. Then examine your relationship history to see how you've unconsciously sought or avoided these parental patterns in romantic partners. The projection withdrawal practice. When you feel intense emotion toward your partner, pause and ask, what is this feeling telling me about myself? Instead of immediately reacting, sit with the emotion and explore what personal wound or need might be driving it. Jung's individuation in relationship approach. Stop trying to complete yourself through your partner. Instead, take responsibility for developing the psychological qualities you seek in others. If you want more emotional support, become more emotionally supportive. If you want more adventure, become more adventurous yourself. The authentic self. Assessment. Regularly check in with yourself about whether you're being genuine in your relationship or performing a persona. Jung found that relationships based on authentic self-expression are much more satisfying and sustainable. Jung's dream. Analysis for relationships. Pay attention to dreams about your partner or about relationships in general. Your unconscious often communicates important insights about your relationship dynamics through dream imagery. The psychological type compatibility check. Understand your own psychological type and your partner's. Instead of trying to change each other, learn to appreciate and work with your natural differences. Jung's active imagination practice. Spend time in dialogue with different aspects of your psyche. Talk to your inner critic, your wounded child, your wise elder. When you meet these parts of yourself consciously, you stop projecting them onto your partner. Most importantly, Jung emphasized patience with the integration process. These patterns, developed over years or decades, they won't change overnight, but every moment of consciousness you bring to your relationships creates the possibility for genuine transformation. Remember, Jung's goal isn't to eliminate attraction or chemistry. It's to ensure that your attractions are based on authentic compatibility rather than unconscious compulsion. The journey from toxic patterns to authentic love is challenging, but it's the most important work you'll ever do, and Jung's insights provide a roadmap that has guided millions of people toward genuine intimacy and lasting happiness. Jung spent his entire career warning us about the psychological forces that drive us into toxic relationships. His message was clear. Until you become conscious of your unconscious patterns, you're destined to repeat them. But here's the empowering truth. Once you understand these patterns, you have the power to change them. You're no longer a victim of your unconscious programming. You become the conscious creator of your relationship destiny. Every toxic relationship in your past was actually your psyche's attempt to heal itself. The problem wasn't that you chose the wrong people, it's that you didn't understand what your unconscious was trying to tell you. Jung believed that relationships are the ultimate laboratory for psychological growth. Every conflict, every attraction, every disappointment contains valuable information about your inner world. The question is, will you use this information to grow, or will you continue repeating the same unconscious patterns while expecting different results? Jung's work shows us that authentic love is possible, but it requires consciousness, courage, and commitment to personal growth. It means facing your shadows, integrating your projections, and taking responsibility for your own psychological wholeness. This isn't easy work, but it's the most important work you'll ever do. Because when you heal your relationship with yourself, you automatically transform your relationships with others. If this video has resonated with you, I need you to take action right now. First, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. I regularly share insights from Jung and other depth psychologists that can revolutionize your understanding of yourself and your relationships. Second, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Jung's insights have the power to save people from years of heartbreak and help them find the authentic love they deserve. Third, start implementing Jung's techniques immediately. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the right relationship. The work begins now, with wherever you are in your life. Leave a comment below sharing which of Jung's insights hit you the hardest. Was it the shadow projection, the Anima Animus trap, the parental complexes? Your sharing helps create a community of people committed to conscious relationships. Remember, Jung warned us that toxic relationships begin with unconscious projection and the illusion of the perfect mirror. But now you know what to look for. You have the tools to distinguish between authentic attraction and unconscious compulsion. Your past relationship patterns don't have to determine your future. With Jung's insights as your guide, you can break free from toxic cycles and create the conscious, authentic love you've always wanted. The choice is yours. Will you continue operating from unconscious patterns, or will you do the work to become conscious? Your future relationships and your happiness depend on your answer. Toxic relationships begin with this: But now you know how to recognize it before it destroys your chance at real love. Carl Jung already warned us. The question is, will you listen?